And I think that what people forget is I don't know how many times I've heard in my life, especially in the full service, I wish you'd spend more time and do a better job. And I always wanted to say, is it okay if I spend more time than the guy in front of you?
Right.
Well, no, that's not okay. Because time is very important to people. It's probably more important than the price, is my belief. And so you have to be quick.
Welcome to the Modern Car Wash Podcast. I'm your host, Dan St. Jacques. Today we have our second ICA Hall of Famer on the podcast. I'm joined by Bob Hodge. He has over 50 years experience in the car wash industry, manufacturing equipment, and building car washes. It was a super interesting conversation. We went for everything. We'll cover everything from philosophy to equipment manufacturing, running car washes, to water skiing and Elvis karaoke. It was a lot of fun. Bob's a wealth of knowledge and really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy it too. So here's today's show. Well, Bob, welcome to the Modern Car Wash Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Really excited to have you here and glad we could get you here in our office again. I know obviously your name is synonymous with car washing. I think a big part of our audience will be pretty familiar with you, but I think to start, it'd be great to get a sense of, again, if we just go back through sort of your background in the car wash industry, just take us back and work us through your background and kind of go from there. I think that's a good place to start.
That sounds good. I was in graduate school in philosophy. I was planning to be a professor of philosophy. And people always ask, well, where'd you learn your engineering? And philosophy is not opinion, it's logic. And so it's very mathematical, really. And anyway, I was in graduate school. I was working for part-time at Octopus Car Washes in Madison, Wisconsin. And my mentor in the car washing, John Jerkins, who's since passed away, but a phenomenal man, had been a pilot in World War II. And we became good friends and wound up working there and never finished my dissertation. I did teach at Regis College for a while, took logic course, but at any rate, that's how I got started. So my engineering background was basically built a lot of tree forts when I was a kid and whatever, built a submarine when we were about 6th grade or something. So that was my mechanical background, but never took engineering. But when I was a teaching assistant, and also when I taught at Regis College, I taught a logic course and an introduction to philosophy. And philosophy is not opinion, it's logic. Mm-hmm. And I wish there was more logic in the world than there is, but that's the way it is. But that helped me design equipment, and I've enjoyed that since I've done that. And that's what I really have enjoyed in the car wash business, new innovations, etc. So anyway, that's how I kind of got started in the business and got quite addicted to it. It's been 50 years now.
So when you get started, so while you're teaching, were you still at that point still involved in car washing, or did you step away?
I was involved in car washing. I was teaching in Colorado Springs. We had a car wash, and I taught when I taught for Regis. No, I was in graduate school as a teaching assistant. That's when I taught logic courses.
Okay.
I had the whole
All right.
course.
So then you're working there. So how does it get to from the point where you're saying you start getting interested in the engineering side of it? How does it get to the point where you say, I think I can develop something. I think I can work on this. I think I can develop a system that maybe works better.
Well, basically, it's not like it's all original. I mean, I had some fairly original ideas, but basically, we got in the car washes, and I'm looking at some of the equipment made back then. It was pretty primitive, and stuff didn't last, and it would break down in no time. So I basically tried to make stuff heavier duty and longer lasting, so that grief of trying to fix equipment all the time. And it was a long process. It didn't happen overnight, but you start learning about, it's not that I didn't learn it at college, it had nothing to do with it, but I realized this bearing only lasts 3 months. And we didn't do a lot of cars.
Right.
I mean, if you did 100,000 cars back then, that was high volume car wash. And so I just started by, just make it better. And then over time, I developed some pretty original ideas, more mechanical than like high-techy stuff. I'm not a real computer person, right? So, and I know enough, I minored in physics, so I know mechanics pretty well. I have a good sense of what works and doesn't work. And it's kind of like Shane in a way. I mean, Shane didn't not have a doctorate degree, but that's not where I learned it. I learned it by hands-on operating car washes and saying, this is not a good idea. We can do better.
And there's certainly an advantage to that, being somebody who works in a car wash, operates a car wash, to understand
Yes.
the challenge that the equipment's facing, which is like you're saying, I guess that's what you're experiencing,
Exactly.
being in there hands-on.
Absolutely.
So was there something that you started with, and did it start with, here's one project, here's one piece of equipment that I want to focus on, I think I can make this better, and then saying, well, I did, this ended up working, let's move to something else? Or was it everything at once? You're saying, I think I can tackle numerous problems.
Oh, it's over time develops. I was telling Shane about the log chain, which I was the first one to use in the car wash industry. And this was, I was actually still working for Octopus, and I was renting a farmhouse. I had a St. Bernard dog, and 3 other guys, they all had dogs. So we rented this farmhouse, and the farmhouse was probably 8 miles from campus. And I used to ride my bike to school, just try to stay in shape. But in this farmhouse, the farmer who owned the house had another big farm, and he bought this farm, but he didn't want the house. He wasn't going to live there, so he rented it out. But he still kept this huge barn, which is probably 300 feet long. Mm-hmm. And in that barn, we had this conveyor. I'm not mentioning the manufacturer, but it was total garbage. And it would break down, because we used to hook, when I first worked for Octopus, we used to hook it on with a chain and pull the car through to the bumper, pull off bumpers. Someone hook them to tie rods, and they'd bend the tie rod in the car, and the steering didn't work, and all that kind of stuff. Plus, it was dangerous. You'd bending over to hook a chain onto a car, and someone might drive forward and crush you or whatever. So it wasn't good. But this conveyor was breaking down, and this was the first roller conveyor that we ever saw. But the rollers were so poorly designed, they were breaking all the time. The chain was breaking, and you couldn't have a busy day without the conveyor going down. And the chain was rinky-dink and would break. And at any rate, in this barn had this log chain going around, pulling like 300 feet long. This log chain went down and had big paddles on it, moved the cow manure out the door, basically. I'm like, that's a chain that could work, and we're still using to this day.
Great, it's amazing
all kinds of people using that. So where it started from, yeah.
Amazing where the inspiration can come from. Not
yes,
something
right.
that's necessarily
nothing to do with a car wash. But I thought, now that's a chain that's not going to break easily. So anyway, that's how that started. And then I redesigned that conveyor over time, and I replaced a lot of conveyors. And that's when I kind of got interested in building equipment. So I had a company. We built equipment way back in the 60s and early 70s with this log chain. We were replacing a lot of the car washes that hooked on with the chain. We'd put this, I made a surface conveyor with that log chain, but I sold a lot of those. That's like I started, and pretty soon I became partners in certain car washes, and that's where I really developed some more of the more recent, last 20 years or so, ideas. But I mean, the other thing that I developed, and never run a car wash without them, is the grill brushes that you guys are now going to build. And I sold that company to Vacutech, and they sold it for a while, but never. I mean, we were expensive, and I used to say I'm the most expensive equipment in the world. I was proud of that, because when I first made equipment, I tried to compete with Hannah and everyone else, but you couldn't make quality products. And so it really was for a car wash that's going to do high volume. And I was good at running high volume in car washes. I mean, we did huge amount of cars, and we still do. And so you had to build heavy duty stuff. And of course, we've gone to all exterior now, like most of the industry. And the full service days were a nightmare. I'm sure people listening can relate to that. we used to have, if it's raining and snowing, you need 6 people. Now the roads cleared up, this covered with salt, and you have infinite demand. Now you need 70 people. And I used to say it's like your country's going to war, and you realize, I don't have an army. Well, forget boot camp. Here's a rifle. They're invading the West Coast. Get to it. You have 40 people that are, labor-ready type guys coming in, and you really couldn't treat your employees fairly. And I think it's very important to pay a decent wage and have self-respect. You couldn't do that in full service because you basically had to hire anybody. I'd ask guys, I'll work for food. No, I'm not working for money. I want food because, in the corner. You want to need a job today? So it was a hard business, really hard. And the exteriors made it so you can treat when you're full service, you couldn't guarantee you're going to work. You couldn't stay in business if 70 people on the clock were doing no cars, So it was all over the place. You couldn't treat them fairly. And, didn't make yourself feel good about yourself because you're really taking advantage of people. And so the exterior model, and back all the way into the 80s, we just thought exteriors didn't work. I know Hoffman had 165 and did it, but most of the exteriors weren't successful because, again, they didn't really change the model. They still had the sloppy-looking people working guiding on typically, and it just wasn't done properly. So I think if you treat your employees with respect and decent wage, we never, for a long time now, I never send people home anymore because the weather's crummy. We just find work to do, and you guaranteed your hours, period. And I think it's made a big difference. I don't think people are as panicked like the Jim Croce song at working the car wash is the worst possible job you could ever have, right? And, I think the people that work for us now, they stay with us and they feel respectful, because we make everybody wear ties, and that's not a necessary condition. But people say, well, you make them wear ties. They're young. They don't like to wear ties. But I think in the beginning, when we first started doing that, I think they actually liked it because you're not a car wash schluck, right? So that's important. So I got real interested in learning how to do volume, and I think I've gotten very good at it. And like I said, we do a lot of cars, and even in exterior, it's not easy to do a lot of cars, but you have to work at it, and you have to have good people to do it.
So just to go back a little bit, so after you develop this conveyor, you see that it's working for you. How did you end up scaling that business? How does it end up people saying, he's onto something, we need to think about putting this conveyor in our wash too?
Well, a conveyor is like the heart of the operation. If the conveyor goes down, it's like you just had a heart attack. You're done for. You're incapacitated. And in fact, in the old days, when I had that first conveyor and a breakdown, we used to would have our people try to drive through. That was not a good idea. We'd say, you take every other car, just go further apart, but you drive through slowly, So, our current car washes, we do some huge numbers, and the conveyor. And I'm not saying it doesn't take maintenance, and you have to keep an eye on it. But if you have good people, you keep an eye on it, you make sure the chain's tight. They never break down. They really don't. You just have to maintain it. So you got to have a good maintenance people, and this has to be taken care of. So we've developed this roller that you guys are using now. Hoffman is, and it does require. Every 100,000 cars, check the bushings on it, and if you just replace the bushings, that roller lasts for a long time, long time. In fact, I don't want to mention numbers of cars, but we have a lot of cars on some of the original rollers. But every 100,000 cars, there's a bushing that it change. And if you do that, to last really forever because it's designed so that there's never steel rubbing on steel. It's always on the urethane or the UMHW, and they're quiet and they last a long, long time. And now the thing with a log chain, for example, is if you let that chain get loose, it's going to come off the sprocket. So it's got to be checked every morning, make sure that that chain is in its tightening range. If you just ignore it, at some point it can't stretch anymore, and it's going to come off the sprocket, and you're down. It's going to take an hour to get the chain back on. So there's no such thing as will last forever. Everything wears, but if you take care of the proper maintenance, and again, we use 2 7/16 inch bearings to support our stuff, because one of the things I found over time, and I found this pretty quickly actually, people use roller bearings to hold. This is an engineering talk, but I learned this in the car wash, not from an engineering. So a roller bearing is a Timken bearing, and it takes radial force and it takes thrust force. A roller bearing just takes radial force. It doesn't hold weight going down on it. So it's going to wear out faster. The weight's pushing that way on it. So I started using all roller bearings on the main kind of arms. And the smaller stuff doesn't matter, but heavy equipment. So I started making stuff pretty heavy duty. People say it's going to last forever. Well, it still doesn't last forever, but it lasts a long, long time. And it was expensive. I mean, it wasn't cheap to build, so I didn't flood the market with a ton of equipment, but we sold a fair amount of stuff over the years. And I have conveyors that I built, 35 years ago, still running.
So when you started manufacturing conveyors, were the first ones being manufactured in the farmhouse, or were those moved out of places?
We just had a shop, not near as high-techy as yours. We didn't have high-techy in those days, so I didn't have a water jet or this stuff. We just welded it together, guys. Yeah.
Is there a pet project of yours that was a favorite the development that you've put in place?
Well, in the last 20-some years, I've been in the car wash business. I was touchless for many years because John Jerkins, who I first worked for, wanted to get rid of brushes. And I can understand that, because even the Hodge equipment, we occasionally damage a car, stuff gets ripped off or whatever happens, and things happen. And so you have very naive thoughts in your life. And the worst thing in the car wash industry is people claiming scratch their car. And I'm not saying we've never scratched cars, because we have. And I've never had a problem paying for when they do it. But when you know you didn't do it, you go home with that customer screaming and yelling at you, scratch. I know every scratch in my car. I inventory it every hour, But I've had two naive thoughts in my life. So you were tempted, everyone was tempted in the 80s to go to touchless. And then, of course, Ballinger came out with cloth, and it was supposed to be brushless. But actually, in some sense, the cloth actually could scratch worse, because it's a screen that holds the dirt in there. So if it's in there, it can scratch a car, no question about it. And then foam came along. That helped the scratching, but didn't totally solve it. But at least it wasn't like the cloth holding the material in there. And at any rate, so I was thinking touchless is the way to go. And you could get and we were full service. We dried it off at the exit end, so if it didn't quite get clean, we could fix it there or rewash it or whatever. And we did have a percentage of rewashing, but it was very expensive to run because the chemistry was expensive to get it clean. But it kind of worked, and but you're always assuming that's what people want. But when I went touchless, I thought, people are going to understand it. And so I've had two very naive thoughts in my life. Number one, when my kids are about this big, when they get a little older, I can talk to them rationally. When they got to be teenagers, it was way worse. Right? So that was irrational thought number one I had. Number two was, okay, what scratched your car? There's no brushes in there. Nothing touched them other than air and water. And it was, I don't know, blankety blank scratched. I know every scratch in my car. And I thought, when I built the car washes in Spokane, I might as well put the brushes back. I'm going to get blamed anyway. And we get a consistent car, but we probably do more damage than the Touchless did. I mean, more stuff does happen. And there's certain periods where, Touchless, we never bent license plates. We didn't rip them off. We did have blowers blow off some of those bug guards back when they were Touchless, but not as much. But then we started to do more and more of the exterior concept and trying to use more horsepower in the blowers. Would blow off. In the 90s, people had those plastic bug guards on all their cars. Poof, it's gone. I don't know how many, and I'd pay for them. We blew it off, even though it was a piece of garbage attached to it, but it was an experience. So we go with the brushes, and we have a certain amount of car damage, and it's something you hate seeing. We do a lot of cars, and of course, you feel like your damage is even greater because just number of odds. I had a manager one time that he said, we never did that much damage in the ex-car wash I worked at. Yeah, you did 1/10 the amount of cars we did. How many per car was probably the same dollars
Right.
per car, But when you start doing high volume, that damage number's pretty big.
So how about the changes in the industry kind of in the last 10 years? You talk about the move to more of the express exterior, and then you have kind of the inception or so many more operators moving to an unlimited model. How has that changed
Oh, it's
volume?
been huge in volume. It's unbelievable. We do numbers of cars now that, 15 years ago, you would have thought, he's full of BS. No way you're doing that many cars. And it's amazing. Basically, 3/4 of our customers are on passes.
And you end up getting, I guess there's the benefit of that, obviously, that then you have sort of recurring revenue once you have that model, that you're not rising those peaks of,
Yes,
the busy
absolutely.
times.
We have car washes in the Northwest where it rains a lot, and but it also gets them dirty. So we do very good, not as good as in the summer, because our summers are beautiful, and we do a lot of cars in the summer and in the sunny, like every car wash. But we have one car, which is before the past days. We had a car wash that, it's an interesting story. We built a double tunnel. One was going to be full service, so I still kind of believe in full service, and one was going to be an exterior. That was the idea. And the idea of the exterior was we will get this demand after snow and crummy weather, get this big demand, because that's what would happen in Wisconsin and Colorado at car washes. You get a snowstorm and you go create infinite demand on that day. That's why you need 70 people. Most of the time, you only need, even on a sunny day in the summer, you maybe 30 people. And that could be in that winter time, especially Colorado, you get this nasty storm, it's cold, and then it's 50 degrees, cars are covered with salt, and it's absolutely all you can wash. And we didn't know how to wash high volume. This was full service, and it was hard to, I did 200 cars an hour once in full service, and I was like, yeah. But the total number of cars at the end of the year was maybe 180,000 cars or something like that, which was a good number. And so it evolved into the past. And even in the beginning, I was kind of skeptical. What do you have to give a free car wash? They're going to come in, and I thought it would be real busy in the winter. It turned out when we first started, the winter, the passes were dropping off. They were canceling them because people think you wash more in the summer, but they do more in their driveway in the summer, but they don't in the winter. But now they maintain the passes all through the bad weather because they realize it gets dirty real quick. So we had really great this past winter doing huge amounts of cars with, even though the weather was crummy, but the cars were getting dirty, so they were coming in. But you still didn't do as much as in the summer. You probably do more per. Probably the usage is a little higher because if it's totally crummy out, they don't. We still do a lot of cars, but we make money every month, whereas typically we would lose money in the Northwest in, say, November, December, or whatever, which you'd have some real busy days in there if the streets happened to dry off and the snow melted and it cleared off. But it didn't happen. In Colorado, winter was our busy season because we'd have a snowstorm, and then it's gorgeous for 2 weeks, and we'd have 2 weeks of crazy busy, and then it would snow again or whatever would happen. So that's been fun. And so the innovations have to do with when we started doing these exteriors and putting brushes back in. And it was, even though we didn't have passes at that point in time, we still was a very high volume car wash. It was 2 tunnels. We were capable of doing a lot of cars. I could have, every month I could have paved my house with license plates instead of shingles, because they were getting ripped off, but I wanted a clean car. So that's when I came up with the grill brush concept. I wanted to rotate the brush the other way. So instead of bending the license plate up, it flattens it out. And so that's what we do. And that's why I think it's very important to an exterior car wash to have grill brushes in there. And they have to work properly. And they're big and complicated. And that's what Shane and I are working on right now.
You say you're not a computer guy, but now so much more, I have to assume, in terms of the equipment itself. It's so reliant on automation and sort of depending on computer automations for the actual processing times of vehicles and those sort of things.
It can, but I'm still an old guy, and I'm not against computers, and I want to use some of their technology, but I think you can't forget about the mechanical part. The best source of energy is gravity. It always works, right? It never gets a short in it, never fails. So I had designed equipment years ago that worked on gravity. I had a wraparound brush, so it came off a car, did the front end, just fell back to its natural position. Mm-hmm. So, but there are things which you can't quite do. So some things that are exciting, what Hoffman does is, I'm planning to work with. So the grill brush I built is rotating opposite direction. So it's instead of, a typical wraparound spinning this way, so it rolls off the car. Mm-hmm. So when we want to flatten the plates, it's spinning this way. It wants to hang on the car once it's pulling itself into the center of the car. And we got to get it off. So I've depended on a very wide pivot point. So the arm, this wraparound is way out here. It's moving forward. So even though it's trying to stay on, it can't, but it's very gradually trying to go off. A wraparound, if you run a wraparound backwards by mistake, and I've had my manager, maintenance guys do that. If you run it the wrong direction, it bends the shaft and everything else happens because it's trying to get off like this. It's getting off real fast. And so what we're trying to work on is a better sensing device. So I use proximity switches. If this brush gets like a truck with big rhinoceros guards, and so humans are supposed to push the retract button so they don't come in. Mm-hmm. And they're humans, and they occasionally forget. And they forget to push the button, and I've done it myself. It's rotating the wrong way. It gets in there, and the car jumps a roller, and then the next car runs into it. Of course, we do have this high-techy no pile-up system, which isn't 100%, but it protects a lot of those collisions. So that saved a lot of grief that happens in exteriors where you got customers in the car and they put their foot on the brake and they do all kinds of stuff. So you can't control the customer with the computer or anything else. Right? Give a little shock, say, you touch that brake. But there are things that I think that Shane and Tom even worked on with the technology which can improve this. So the problem with my design of the grill brush is the pivot point has to be really wide so that when this arm swings, it's going forward, not like this. So it's got to swing, and that's why it cleans so well. And when I first did it, I just did it for the license plates. And I realized this cleans the bugs, so we don't have to prep for bugs. We don't have to do anything with bugs. We put those first with strong alkaline product on it, and it scrubs the alkaline into it, which is what attacks bugs. But it also spends 6 feet of travel with the car, just staying on those bugs, staying on them, staying on them, staying on them. But I think we can do it with some technology where instead of proximity switches, so we'll have a cylinder at some point. I don't do it all by gravity. But the car pushes it, that's mechanical. But at some point, if it can't get off, we got a problem because the car's going to, it's typically a truck or some kind of big thing and it kind of gets, it's rotating that way so it doesn't get off. And so the wider we make the pivot point, I did a car wash that did a huge volume, and it's doing 200 some cars an hour and actually doing it. And so I built some grill brushes years ago that were really wide, but most tunnels aren't that wide. It was 25 feet. And the first set we're going to do in this experiment is also wide, but we're going to slowly play with some technology so we can have a narrower pivot point to fit more of your tunnels. And we can sense the electrical power going. When that happens, we could do a couple things. We could reverse the cylinder so instead of holding it against the car, it's pushing it off. So that'll solve that problem. Or we could just soften up the pressure it's holding that way. We can just play with some things and make some fine adjustments. Gravity and plain mechanical force only works one way. You gotta sometimes need to adjust it a little bit. Slow your fall, put it that way. It's not easy to do with gravity. Gravity doesn't change, it's going to do the same thing. So
clearly you're clearly passionate about the mechanical side of these things, about the manufacturing of this equipment. Was there ever a point when you're manufacturing this equipment looking to say, this is what I want to do and I can translate this to other industries? Did you ever think about moving into anything else and focusing solely on?
No.
That was it, just car wash?
No, I'm addicted to car washing. I can't totally. I actually do miss teaching. And when I taught at Regis, I had car washes. That was a part-time job. I didn't get paid much for it, but I really enjoyed it. And I taught logic, and I also taught introduction to philosophy. I miss philosophy, and I still read a fair amount of it. And I also, when I was a teaching assistant, the best students I had were people in the sciences, not people in literature, not people in English. In my life, I've never read a poem I really understood. I remember being in an advanced English class and saying, that stands for this, and that symbolizes this. What? No, I like A implies B, sure. Or mathematics. I've read in my lifetime a lot of science, so I understand the world pretty well. I think, getting off the subject a little bit, thinking about philosophy, so physics is so much like philosophy. It really is. Einstein didn't. Science is not where you go out and you do a whole bunch of experiments. No, you come up with a theory, and the way be a good theory, it has to be falsifiable. And so people think, well, that's crazy. No, what it means is the theory you have to have something that can prove it false. So if it's not a good theory, if you can come up, so science is not like opinions and political stuff where you just argue on emotion. Argue, if your theory is correct and I do this to prove it, and if it fails, then I know my theory is wrong. But if it's correct, it's correct. But it doesn't mean it's always correct, because someone still might come with something wrong. So in relativity theory, Einstein made predictions about what light's going to do going around gravity. They did the experiment. It doesn't mean it's true, but it's not been proven false. So science goes with very often battling. I want to prove your theory is false. And that's important. There'd be a theory in there. So you could use a simple example. Freud has this theory about everybody loves their mother. Well, how do you prove that? Jones is nasty to his mother, and Smith is real nice. But he has this little mechanism there of really nice repression. Okay? So your theory doesn't tell you anything because you don't know how someone's going to behave because he loves his mother. It still could be a total jerk, right? You know? So so your theories can't just include everything. Theory is not opinion. And I hear this in, talk about ethics, but in religious fanatics talk about evolution. That's just a theory. Well, prove the theory wrong. It's not just a theory. And just because you believe something doesn't mean it's true. And that was the hardest thing in teaching logic. People would say, well, my opinion is as good as yours. No, not if it's illogical. So my math is as good as yours. And so 2 + 3 could be 10. No, it's a theory. So I think that whether it's just car wash equipment or a tree fort, you have to use logic. You have to understand how the branch holds something, and are you putting on this a strong enough thing so you don't fall? And I built a few things, tree forts where the branch broke. That wasn't good. So, you learn how the world works. So, and I'm always kind of getting on the science side for a second. So I think science could be taught and logic could be taught people, and people would act more rational. And car washing is the same way. You try to run your business rationally. And an example I always like to talk about, just getting off the subject of car washing a little bit, but I'll just say it anyway. I think you could teach some physics to people in 7th or 8th grade, but people are panicked about science because they think it's all math. It doesn't have to be all math. So, for example, you ask the average person, I don't care if they have a college degree or not, how does an astronaut stay weightless up in space? You know what 99% of the answer will be? There's no gravity up there. That's not true. Gravity is infinite direction. There's gravity. And so if you're in an elevator and the cable breaks and you're falling and there's no friction, it's always in physics, you eliminate friction, you're falling and you're floating around in the thing. Are you saying there's no gravity there? Right. There's gravity. You're going down and you're going to end real soon because you're going to hit bottom and you're going to get killed. So basically what Newton said, and I think you can make this pretty simple. You don't have to make it complicated. It's not 8 million formulas on a blackboard. Just common sense. If you take a gun and shoot it straight out, people will say, which lands first, the bullet? And you have bullets released at the exact same time from the same height and fall straight down. So which lands first in the ground? They land simultaneously because force is applied equally by gravity. Because you're moving forward doesn't mean gravity isn't pulling you down. So they hit at the same time. Now, if you shoot it faster, you'll go further, but you'll still land at the same time. So some sense, keep that law in mind. And then if you're, Newton said, if you're on top of a mountain and you shoot that bullet straight, what's going to happen? It's going to hit way out there. More power is going to fast. If you get to a certain speed, what happens? Well, it's falling towards Earth, but the Earth's also curving away from it. So when you're in the satellite, you're just in free fall, just like the elevator, except fortunately you're going this far fast enough you stay in orbit. If you go too fast, you'll go into outer space. But it's interesting. I think you can make things interesting for people. But people are all, and I just remember in logic courses or even this thing of its opinion is my theory. Well, it's not a theory. You just got a belief you have. So in logic, there's the distinction between truth and valid. You could have a valid argument. It's perfectly valid. The conclusion still might be false because one of your premises is false. So truth is something much harder to find. Validity is easier to find because that's mathematical. And, so just designing car wash equipment is somewhat really similar to that. That's why the best students that I had were people in engineering and sciences, not people like poetry.
So after you start developing equipment, when do you decide that you actually want to go out and do this yourself now and open your own washes, that you can start doing that as well?
Well, I worked for Jerkins for a while, and kind of liked it. I mean, and I never planned to be in the car wash business my entire life. And I never finished my dissertation, which was going to be on philosophy of science. And
did you get to start it?
The what?
The dissertation. Did you get to start it, or did you?
Oh, I got it started. Not very far. I was running around the car washes. Oh, this is that one, design this one, and I always thought, well, I just do this for maybe 10 years, and then I'll finish my dissertation, and then never did. So I got the job at Regis as I forget what they even call it now, all but dissertation, so I could get a job teaching, and it was so I did that for a while. I enjoyed it actually. So.
Do you have is there one that you prefer over the other? If you think of building your own, developing your own car washes versus the equipment, is it still building the equipment that still is more attractive to you than the wash?
Both.
Yeah.
I'm a competitive person. I mean, I'm not hungry for money type guy. That's not why I do it. I was telling Shane, I love water skiing. Because there's a goal. I wouldn't want to water ski just to water ski. So when I first discovered buoys and a challenge to go around them, oh God, one more buoy. I'd do anything for one more buoy. It's similar. I just want to build the best car wash, and I get a kick out of it. So.
I think the car wash industry is pretty interesting about that too, because there's a lot of camaraderie obviously in the industry itself, but I think by nature most operators are competitive that way. Or wouldn't you say that's the case that
absolutely
that you want to be the high volume guy? You want to be able to show those numbers like you're talking about, where people say no way, there's no way that's possible.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of by nature. It seems like that's again across the industry. There's a lot of camaraderie.
It's hard to
shows.
I don't want to tell you the numbers. I don't want to spread around, and partners don't like it and whatever.
Yeah.
But they're numbers I'm very proud of. It's like in school. I just ran. I don't know if you know water skiing, but you get up to high numbers keep shortening the rope until you finally it's almost impossible to do. And the pros, of course, it's unbelievable what they do. I'm not there, but I do pretty. For an old guy, I do pretty good.
I'd like to touch on that a little bit more, because I know you actually compete.
Yeah.
And so how did that start for you? That you start water skiing, and then like you're saying, obviously you said, once you see that there's a competitive side to it, that you started to take it in more. But how long you've been doing that for, and how did it?
Well, I didn't learn to water ski itself until I shouldn't say that. I was down in Bermuda. Not Bermuda. My father had a stroke when I was in college, and we went to. My uncle had a condo down in Nassau. They rented a boat. Well, let's try water skiing. So I got up on it, and then I didn't ski for years. But when I moved to Colorado, I moved there for snow skiing. And I met somebody and started water skiing. I really liked it, but I still was a snow ski fanatic. And I had seen, when I was first looking for car washes there, I was going through Nebraska on Route 80, I was seeing these little gravel pits along the freeway where they dug sand for building the interstates. And I saw these little red buoys floating out there. And when I was in Wisconsin, I used to sail. And I thought, why? And I was thinking there were buoys to anchor your boats. So why would you have sailboats in this tiny little lake? Because they're skinny little lakes and all these. And I didn't realize there was some order. I mean, driving by and realized there was a certain order to them, but it was a slalom course. And that's why I actually met this girl. I wasn't married then, and she was a water skier, so we started water skiing. And that relationship didn't work out, but I kept the water skiing and continued on because I was doing a car wash for a guy down in Texas, and so she was with me, and that's the first time. Oh, what those red things are, because these guys were water skiers. So I got addicted right then and there. I said, because I thought I was a pretty good skier. I could make a big spray because I was strong in those days, and I could make a big spray. So I learned that pretty quick. And so he said, well, let's try the course. So So we're just going to take, so how fast do you go? I usually go about 35, 36 miles an hour. And I didn't have a tournament boat. I just had a boat that I bought. It was a big engine in the back, cigar type thing. It wasn't a ski boat, but at any rate, so just, usually a gate, you got to go through a gate, and you got to ski around this buoy, and there's 6 buoys you got to ski around. And they look pretty far away. It looks like it should be easy. So he's, don't go through the gate, just go wide. I went around this one, and I barely got to that one, and we're going 26 miles an hour. He says, go slower. Oh, no, I don't ski that slow. And I get around that, and I go, my God, I can't get to the 3rd buoy. I can't get to it. And I went back to Colorado. I bought a ski boat, found a course up in Denver. I was living in Colorado Springs at that point in time. And I just was addicted to it. And it's, snow skiing was fun, which I love snow skiing, but water skiing is just, so I live on my own lake now, so I could ski after work. Snow skiing is like an all day or all project. And so that's how I got addicted to it. I'm still chasing them.
Are you still competing though?
Oh yeah.
When was the last one? You got anything coming up still, or?
Well, I actually did not have a good year. I broke my hip last winter, so I've been skiing, but it's been a struggle to get back. The best I ever did for water skiing, people don't know the numbers, but I have the record for the Northwest for the men's over 70 group, which was 3 at 35 feet off the rope. So
another feather in the cap then, outside
yeah,
of the car
kind
wash
of.
industry.
Well, I wasn't national. I was 4th rated in the country once, but this year I've been struggling. Well, this picture you saw, I was still struggling because my hip was weak, and I'm just getting older. I'm not as strong as I used to be. I'm still fairly strong, but I am going on 80 next year. So.
But to circle back to the car wash business, yeah. When Bill Martin was on, he was talking about sort of the change in the industry in the last few years, and sort of the more private equity investors that you're seeing now, and especially kind of through last year, through the kind of this COVID period, that the car wash industry has come out pretty well on that side of it, and you're seeing more interest coming in. Can you talk about that shift too in the industry that you're seeing now with more people coming in and the ability to scale quickly? How has that shifted the landscape?
Well, it's been huge for us. I mean, there's no question. I mean, it's been huge, and I don't know if this is true. I have this crazy theory. This is my anti-high-techy stuff, but it's. I think the car washes possibly. I don't know if this is true. It's just a theory. Not a theory, nothing. Belief that I have. Maybe we're more busy because everyone's working at home and they're not really doing their job, and they're thinking, the boss ain't watching. I can go get a car wash, because we've been incredibly busy during the pandemic. Way busier than we've ever been. And so I don't know if that's valid or not, but I know that I hate. What I don't like is, and again, it's my age, I suppose. Hate my phone. I hate computers, and I know they're wonderful things, but they certainly cause grief sometimes to you. And, this concept that you can just do everything from, like I hear corporations are going to get rid of all their offices and everyone's going to work from home. That has more faith in human. No, I know there's people who can do it. I'm not saying they can't, but I know there's a lot of people that are going to take advantage of it. And if you're a woman and you got kids hollering and you're trying to take care of your kids and doing your work, my instinct tells me it's not going to work very well. I'm not saying it can't work. I know it can, but I do know that from personal experience with the car washing, very hard to get parts now. Mm-hmm. Very hard to get anything done on time. And you talk to a salesperson, oh yeah, I'm going to take care of it, and you don't hear them for 3-4 weeks. They never get back to you, or they forget about you, or whatever happens. And I know that a lot of these people are working from home. I can hear the kids in the background, you know. So, I'll get off the subject of the things, but the passes undoubtedly caused a huge increase in volume, probably more than anything that's ever happened. And Bill and I were really the first ones to do free vacuums. And everyone told me at that time, you're out of your mind. Why do you make look at all the quarters you're losing? And I used to say, well, yeah, but I don't hear complaints about the vacuuming anymore. And vacuuming was always hard because in the full service business, some people's cars were immaculate. It was like, you're done.
Right.
Other ones were absolute pigsties. And it would take you forever. And you have the people say, in a full service, you still had to do volume. You can't spend 10 minutes vacuuming a guy's car. This is the best we can do, you know. And I think that what people forget is, I don't know how many times I've heard in my life, especially in the full service, I wish you'd spend more time and do a better job. And I always wanted to say, is it okay if I spend more time than the guy in front of you?
Right.
Well, no, that's not okay. You know, because time is very important to people. It's probably more important than the price, is my belief. And so you have to be quick.
You know, when looking at building car washes, I mean, obviously you've built a ton and you've gone through that. I know, obviously, like as we were just kind of talking about, that there's more and more operators that are coming in now, and there's more being built now. What are some of the challenges that you've seen when, you know, in the past that now, you know, going forward, if I do another one, here are a few pitfalls that I can avoid when actually developing and building a wash itself?
I don't know. I don't know what the future brings, you know, and I'm at the age where not much future left anyway, probably, realistically. But my kids are not in the car wash business, but I don't know what the future is totally down 30 years from now. I don't know. I know the technology is incredibly what's accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to predict what's going to happen 50 years from now. Don't know. The worst case scenario is everybody's going to have driverless cars.
Right.
They're probably going to be owned by some huge corporation. They're going to have their center where they do their maintenance. So the cars are going to drive back to their home base, and they're going to get washed, and they're going to get all that stuff. I know that's going to happen at some point. Probably not in my lifetime, but maybe your kid's lifetime, or maybe even mine. They're in their 30s now, but so don't know.
Did they ever take an interest in the car wash industry, or no? Is that never even a question? I know it happens sometimes where they come back. I know Bill talked about his kids first going away, but then coming back into the business.
Well, my kids are different than Bill's, and John does work for us, but he hates the car wash business. He likes making equipment and designing equipment, but his true love is music, and he's a very good musician, and that's a tough business. So he makes his living now by building equipment, but he doesn't want to work weekends. He doesn't want to work nights. He wants schedule, work those, and he's a good worker. I mean, he's also a very funny guy. Well, you know him. He's a phenomenal sense of humor. So he does comedy club and stuff like that. So he has that life. That's his main life. And he also loves hiking and camping, and he does these little videos that are hilarious. I mean, he does one where he's hiking, and it's so funny. And so that's him. And my other son is in clothing business, which is struggling right now with the pandemic and so forth. But he designs clothes, but it's a hard business.
Sure.
So he survives, but so they're not interested in the car washing. I mean, John can design and build equipment. He's a smart guy, and he majored in philosophy at the University of Washington, and decided this isn't for me. So, I don't know.
And the musical side, does that come from you?
Probably more from his mother.
Yeah.
I don't know. The karaoke thing started, and I said, I'm going to take some lessons. I took some lessons, but I went to my 50th class reunion, and I had a friend the guy I built a submarine with, Tony Desposito, still a good friend. And his parents, and I was raised in New Jersey, and his parents had a bunch of Italian restaurants around New York and Jersey, and he wound up with a business. And he was in a band that got to be a number 7. I was you would never know this from yapping today, but I was a very quiet, shy kid in high school. I didn't date any. I was afraid to ask a girl out. But he was real popular. He was in a band, and they got to be a number 7 song in the pop charts back in the 50s. A real gimmicky song. Wasn't that great, but it was pretty good. But it got to number 7. And so he wound up with these restaurants and bars, and they had karaoke in them. So he bought karaoke at the 50th reunion. And I've always sang in the shower.
Yeah.
It's like I didn't sing, but I was never in a band or anything like that. And a very quiet, wallflower type kid, right? I did play sports, so I was a jock to some extent, but I wasn't a party or wooing the girls type guy, right? And so Tony has a beautiful voice, way better than I am. And my cousin Maureen, she was at the reunion also, and her mother was Mexican, but she was a Murashi band from Mexico. She toured the United States and so forth. And my uncle was an attorney, and he met her and fell in love with her or whatever. And Maureen probably developed a little genetic stuff. My mother couldn't sing a note to save her life. My father could sing pretty good. So, but I always sang in the shower, and so I'm sitting with Tony and Maureen, and they'd go up and sang, and they were both really good. And so I got up and sang, okay, I can do this. So I went up, and they said, well, I'll help you out. And I got up and sang Blue Suede Shoes by Elvis. But I was a nervous wreck. And I read later about Elvis, he shook like, because he says, I'm so nervous. He was telling when he was with Sun Records, he was telling Sam Phillips, I'm so nervous, I can't stop. And Sam said, don't stop. So I was up there shaking like crazy, and everyone's going, God, we didn't know you could sing. I don't know if I could sing so well. It's just crazy, my knees are going and my hips are shaking. I was just a nervous wreck. So, but then I was back in Boise, and Tim, we were doing one of the car washes there. I was building equipment for Bill, and I had just done that karaoke, and there was a karaoke bar down the street from the car wash. And I said, Tim, I just did that. That was fun, I was a nervous wreck, but it was fun. And he said, well, my fiance loves the karaoke, so I started going with her, and she had a nice voice, and I got better over time, But my most popular songs are usually when I'm doing the fast Elvis songs, because I was in Boise 2 weeks ago, and I hadn't sang in quite a while. And so they didn't have karaoke bars open, but it was open. So we went to this one bar, and it was all young guys in there. And this guy got up and sang some fast modern songs. I only know old songs from the 50s and 60s, right? Elvis and Johnny Cash and all these kind of guys. And at any rate, so we went to this bar, and this guy sang. He was really good. Not my kind of music, but he was talented. And and we had just gotten there. So I signed up, and they moved me right after him. So I got up and I said, you guys are having a lot of fun out there, but we had a lot of fun back in the 50s and 60s. You ever heard of Little Richard? And I sang, remember Tutti Frutti?
Yeah.
I went wild on that song. I'm dancing all over the place, and they're all going, they're all singing with me, and they're all grabbing me. Wow, that was phenomenal. Because I almost had a heart attack out there, because dying, dancing around. But it was fun. It was a good time. I don't know if my voice is great, but it's not terrible. I recorded some stuff just to hear what it sounded like. It's okay.
So I guess it's safe to say you've gotten over the stage fright then, huh?
Yes, and it's interesting because I used to be a teacher, and so at one point in my life, I don't know when it was. I was probably in Colorado Springs. I can't remember. But they were having a bunch of car wash people come in. I was supposed to give a talk, and I remember sitting at a long table like this, dinner table wider. And there's about 30 people in there, and I thought I was going. I had been a teacher for years, and I remember teaching the first class. I was nervous, but I got over it real quick. And I saw those people sitting out there, and I sat at the head of the table. I was like, and I finally calmed down. And so I was amazed. And I think that's when I sang that first time. I got over it, and I started doing it. I was nervous a few times. And I'm always nervous in front of my wife because she actually has a very good voice and good sense of music. So I'm always nervous to sing in front of her. But so at any rate, I got over it. And so, yeah, that's how karaoke got into my life at the age of 60 or something.
So coming up here in the next month or so, well, the next 2 months, we got NRCC coming up, ICA. We'll be able to see you at either of those shows.
Yeah, I'll do ICA probably, yeah.
And then we know where to look for you to find you at the karaoke bars, probably.
Yeah, well, I always go to Vegas. I always go to karaoke.
I have to assume. Not full costume, though? They haven't asked you to do a full Elvis costume yet, huh?
No, I'm not. I didn't like Elvis. I liked him when he was back in the 50s and he just dressed cool. I didn't like his jumpsuits particularly.
Well, Bob, that's really, I think, all I have for you today. But thank you so much.
Nice.
It was great. It's a great conversation. So I really appreciate you joining. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks again to our guest, Bob Hodge, for joining us today. A great conversation. It was great fun. As always, you can find us at innovatecarwash.com. You can find this podcast and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.